In the heart of Atlanta, beneath the polished silence of a billionaire's estate, a homeless little black girl hid in a garage, cold, alone, and invisible. She had nothing except the truth. And when she saw danger no one else could see, she chose to speak. What she didn't know was that her voice wouldn't just save a man's life, it would rewrite both of their futures. This isn't just a story about betrayal, wealth, or near death. It's about courage, about choosing love over fear, about the family we build, not the one we're born into. Stay with us because the next 60 minutes will take you from the edge of a deadly cliff to the quiet power of a child's heart. The October wind sliced through Atlanta like glass, sharp and biting, carrying with it the scent of distant rain and dying leaves. In the shadow of the sprawling eco-mansion belonging to Daniel Brooks, a man whose name lit up every sustainability conference on the eastern seaboard, a small figure crouched beneath the marble staircase leading down into the state-of-the-art solar garage. 6-year-old Amara Johnson clutched her threadbare coat tighter around her, its zipper long broken, the sleeves too short for her growing arms. Her curly hair, uncombed for weeks, curled like tiny fists against the chill. Her stomach rumbled, but hunger had become so familiar, it felt more like an echo than a cry. It had been 74 days since Grandma May's funeral, 74 days since the world had stopped making sense. In that time, Amara had learned to avoid attention, to melt into shadows, and to listen more than she spoke. Social workers had come twice, knocking with soft, concerned voices that promised help, but carried the same undertone she'd heard when they took little Terrence from next door. "We'll find you a safe place," they said. But Terrence never came back. The group home they sent him to, he'd whispered to her once, was loud and cold, full of strangers and rules and fists. So, when Grandma May's heart stopped in their tiny apartment on Auburn Avenue, Amara ran. She ran until her shoes fell apart, ran until her lungs burned, ran until the neighborhoods turned from broken fences and barking dogs into wide lawns and security gates. She slept in parks at first, under slides and next to garbage bins. Then, one evening, she stumbled upon the gleaming steel fence of the Brooks estate, nestled on the edge of a wooded reserve. The garage, an architectural wonder of solar panels, thermal glass, and humming quiet, drew her like a hearth. Through the shimmering glass doors, she saw the glowing belly of warmth, where sleek vehicles rested like slumbering beasts, their metal bodies bathed in gold light. One of them, an old cherry-red Tesla Roadster, gleamed with a reverence she didn't yet understand. That first night, she found a way in through a maintenance panel left unlatched near the rear garden. It took time, quiet feet, held breath, memorized patterns of staff movements, but she carved a space for herself behind the stack of disused smart battery crates in the far corner of the garage. There, curled on a flattened cardboard box with Grandma May's faded scarf wrapped around her face, she felt something she hadn't felt in months. Not comfort, not joy, but the tiniest spark of safety. The garage was warm, constant, and quiet. The machines didn't yell or forget her name. They just hummed. Her fingers traced invisible lines along the floor as she whispered prayers Grandma May had taught her. Keep me hidden, keep me whole, keep me brave. She didn't know then that this garage, this sanctuary she had stumbled into by sheer instinct, was not just a shelter. It was a stage, and the curtain was about to rise. The morning sun over Atlanta filtered through the vertical glass fins of the Brooks estate like ribbons of fire caught in crystal, casting fractured rainbows across the polished floors of the home and the curved driveway that wound like a silver tongue through perfectly manicured gardens. Inside the glass and steel garage, where silent electric cars slept like obedient wolves, 6-year-old Amara lay in stillness, hidden behind a fortress of crates marked with Greencore's proprietary solar batteries. Her breath, no longer steaming, rose softly into the warmth as she listened to the electronic purr of the garage door rising. Her muscles tensed, fingers gripping the frayed edges of her scarf. Footsteps echoed. Then the scent reached her first, not of danger, but of leather and eucalyptus, and something faintly metallic, like ozone before a storm. It was Daniel Brooks. He moved with the quiet authority of a man who didn't need to prove his wealth. He simply wore it like a second skin, casual and intentional. His tall frame was wrapped in a navy sweater, sleeves pushed to the elbows, revealing strong forearms that bore no watch but moved with efficiency. In his hands was a long, microfiber cloth, which he folded methodically before reaching for a soft, polishing solution. "Morning, old girl," he murmured to the cherry-red Tesla Roadster that stood at the center of the garage like a sacred artifact. "Let's make you shine for the big day." Amara blinked from her shadowed alcove. She'd never heard anyone speak to a car like that. Not with reverence, not with affection. It reminded her of how Grandma May used to sing to the pothos vines hanging from the kitchen ceiling, saying things like, "Grow strong, babies," and "Thank you for cleaning our air." For a long while, Amara just watched as Daniel gently ran the cloth across the curves of the vehicle, careful not to miss a single inch. His movements were slow, deliberate, more like a sculptor tending to marble than a billionaire tending to machinery. The way he spoke to the car made her chest ache with a strange warmth. "We've got one last job, you and me," he whispered, tracing his fingers along the Tesla's emblem. "After the ceremony, we'll drive the coast, just like I promised Dad." That's when her gaze shifted to the woman who entered behind him. Her heels clicked against the polished concrete like gunshots in a chapel, a rhythm too precise to be accidental. Vanessa Monroe. Amara had heard the name whispered through the air vents, spoken with a mix of awe and affection. She was beautiful in the way magazine covers tried to recreate. Sculpted cheekbones, caramel-highlighted hair tied back in a loose chignon, and lips painted the color of crushed plums. Her dress, a steel-gray sheath that hugged her figure, reflected the coldness in her eyes. "Darling," she purred, her voice a low octave purr wrapped in velvet. "Show me this mysterious wedding surprise you've been hiding." Daniel looked up, boyish grin lighting his face, and Amara's stomach twisted. There was a softness in his gaze, a trust that made her bones shiver. "Come see," he said, leading her by the hand. He reached for the white silk cover draped over the Roadster and pulled it away with theatrical flair. The Tesla glimmered like a ruby under spotlight. "My first love," he said, half joking, "and the first machine my father and I rebuilt together. I figured she deserved a curtain call." Vanessa smiled, but Amara saw the crack in the expression, the moment her eyes flicked from admiration to calculation. She walked around the vehicle, fingers trailing along the doorframe, as though assessing more than design. "It's valuable, isn't it?" "In more ways than one," Daniel chuckled, oblivious. "She's not just a car, she's memory, legacy." "Of course," Vanessa cooed, though her tone held no real sentiment. Behind her soft smile, Amara caught something else, something that made her think of the alley cat that used to wait until Grandma May fell asleep before stealing food right off the stove. It was the same watchfulness, the same measured hunger. For the next hour, Amara stayed frozen, barely daring to breathe as the couple moved around the garage. Vanessa lingered longer than Daniel, trailing behind after he returned inside, her fingers brushing the Tesla's hood a second time, slower this time, as though mapping its vulnerability. That night, as Daniel and Vanessa hosted a small rehearsal dinner for a dozen close friends in the house above, Amara remained in her dark nest, her mind racing. She replayed every look, every word, every flash of something unspoken between the two adults. Daniel's kindness, real and radiant. Vanessa's polish, her poise, her performance. Amara knew the difference. She'd seen enough of the world to recognize masks. She remembered the men who smiled while pushing her away with veiled words. The teachers who spoke sweetly but always looked past her to the quieter, paler kids. She knew when someone wasn't what they seemed. And Vanessa Monroe wasn't what she seemed. Just before midnight, when the last of the guests had gone and the house dimmed into shadows, Amara crept silently from her hiding place. She moved across the garage floor like a whisper, her bare feet barely making contact with the tile. She approached the Tesla carefully, cautiously, and placed her small hand on the car's front wheel. It was warm. Somehow, she felt it was alive. "They're going to hurt you," she whispered. "I think they want to hurt him too." The car, of course, said nothing, but the silence that followed wasn't empty. It felt listening. In that moment, as the wind howled outside and the electronic hums of the house pulsed gently, Amara made herself a silent vow. If no one else saw it, if no one else believed it, she would watch, she would protect. She would not let what happened to Grandma May, who'd once begged a landlord for working heat and received an eviction notice instead, happen to the man who talked to machines like they mattered, even if he didn't know she existed, even if she was just a shadow in the corner of his world. Her small frame curled again behind the crates as the security lights dimmed, but this time her eyes stayed open. She wasn't just hiding anymore, she was listening, and the world above her, so full of lights and lies, was already starting to crack. The third night brought rain, soft at first, like fingers tapping on the glass walls of the Brooks estate, then stronger, heavier, until it became a steady drumbeat against the solar panels that formed the curved roof of the garage. Inside, nestled in her hidden alcove behind the crates of old battery cores, Amara stayed awake, arms wrapped around her thin knees, ears straining through the vent that connected the garage to the main house. The rain wasn't what kept her up. It was the voice. It was Vanessa. She was in the kitchen again. The kitchen was just above the garage, and the vent that ran past the wine cooler and down through the garage's filtration unit carried sound like a whisper trail. Amara had discovered it the previous morning when she was rearranging her corner to avoid the cold draft from the garage's floor vents. That morning, she'd heard Daniel talking on a Zoom call about environmental credits and logistics, his voice low, professional, kind. But tonight the voice from the kitchen was sharp, clipped, drenched in venom, hidden behind breathless control. "The timeline hasn't changed, Marcus," Vanessa snapped, her voice like glass tapping against steel. "The policy cleared this morning. 50 million. Yes, it's locked. He signed the final paperwork 2 days ago. He thinks it's a wedding gift clause. After the reception, he'll want to take that ridiculous car of his for a nostalgic ride." A pause. Then, "Of course I know the route. He wants to go down Southridge Pass near Lake Monroe, the turn just past Sunset Bluff." Amara's stomach dropped. She didn't understand all the words, but she recognized tones. That tone, the one that slithered through Vanessa's voice, was the same one she had heard in men on the street corners late at night, in the landlords who stood in the hallway after Grandma May begged for another week to make rent. It was the tone of people who believed nothing could stop them. "We do it the morning of the wedding," Vanessa continued. "He wants one last drive before the ceremony, says it's tradition." She laughed, a brittle sound with no joy. "Let him have his last tradition, then it's over. The brakes go out. Tesla or not, once it starts rolling, it'll go straight over the edge. Headlines will read like a Greek tragedy. Fiancé dies in tragic car accident. Wife-to-be left shattered." Another pause. "Yes, Marcus. And you get your cut once it's done. Don't call me again tonight. He's upstairs. He might hear." A click. Silence. Amara stared at the wall in front of her, unable to move. Her breath came in short gasps, like something wild trapped inside her chest. She didn't fully understand words like policy or timeline, but she understood one thing with crystal clarity. Someone was going to die. Daniel. The man who had smiled at his car like it was an old friend. The man who talked gently to machines. The man who had never once known that a scared little girl was sleeping 30 feet away from him. And he was going to die because he trusted the wrong smile. Amara curled tighter in her corner, her mind racing. Should she run? Should she hide deeper? Should she leave this place before Vanessa found out she was here and made her disappear too? But the memory of Daniel's voice echoed in her mind. Not what he said, but how he said it. Gentle, steady. Like Grandma May's tone when she read Psalms out loud before bed. People like that shouldn't die alone, not by surprise, not by betrayal. And then came the memory she hadn't let herself replay since it happened. Grandma May, wheezing in the dark as the heater failed again, her hands shaking as she tried to reach the phone. "Don't call the ambulance," she had whispered. "They'll put you in a home if I go, Amara. Just stay with me. Just hold my hand." Amara had held it all night. By morning, the hand had gone cold. She didn't cry. She didn't scream. She packed the food stamps into a plastic bag, took the only coat they had, and walked into a world that didn't see her. But Daniel had never made her feel invisible, even without knowing she existed. His presence filled the garage with something sacred. And Amara, small, barefoot, forgotten Amara, knew deep in her chest that she could not let him die. Not like that. Not when she could stop it. Not when the world had already taken too many good people and left the liars behind. That night, she didn't sleep. She sat upright, watching the Tesla, listening to every creak, every echo from the house above. Her heart beat like a tiny drum, steady and afraid. And when the sky turned violet just before dawn, she whispered to the car, "Don't worry, I'll tell him. I'll find a way." But she didn't know how, not yet, because she was still a child, still invisible, still hiding. And no one listened to girls like her. The next night brought no rain, only stillness, thick and electric like the air before a lightning strike. The moon hung low over Atlanta, filtered through pale clouds that seemed to drift like watchful spirits across the sky. Inside the Brooks estate, silence reigned, but it was not the peace of rest. It was the hush of calculation, of things moving unseen. Amara didn't sleep, not a single blink. She sat curled behind the battery crates, her fingers sore from gripping the edge of the vent, ears trained on every rustle, every movement above, just after 2 a.m. The low hum of the garage's security panel buzzed, softer than usual, a disruption in the code. Someone had disabled the silent alarm. The door opened without its usual chime. Amara froze. 2 figures slipped inside. One she recognized instantly. Vanessa, her heels replaced by soft-soled shoes, hair tied up in a tight braid, lips bare of color. The other was taller, thinner, clad in black from collar to boot. Marcus, or as Vanessa had called him in her whisper the night before, her partner. Amara pressed herself deeper into the shadows, barely breathing, her small heart pounding so hard she feared they'd hear it. "This is it," Vanessa murmured, her voice as smooth and deadly as a razor dipped in honey. "He wants to take the car for a final drive in the morning, run it up to Lookout Ridge before the ceremony. It's the perfect stretch." Marcus knelt beside the Tesla, producing a black case filled with tools that gleamed like instruments of surgery under the low light. "Once the brake fluid line is nicked, not severed, it'll hold for a while. But when he tries to stop downhill, it won't," Vanessa finished. "It'll look like a mechanical failure, tragic. The media will eat it alive. Billionaire dies day of wedding. Heartbreaking." She knelt beside Marcus, pointing to the rear hydraulic system with surprising expertise. "We'll weaken this portion here. Not a full cut, just enough to give after the second sharp curve. That road doesn't forgive mistakes." "You really know your way around these things," Marcus said with a note of admiration. "I've done my homework," she replied, pride glinting in her tone like a blade. Amara watched in silent horror as Vanessa dipped a cloth into a small vial and carefully wiped the bolts clean after each adjustment, leaving no fingerprint, no oil smudge, nothing that would signal tampering to a casual observer. These weren't amateurs. They were artists of deception. When the wrench slipped from Marcus's grip and clattered against the concrete, both froze. "What was that?" Marcus hissed, eyes scanning the darkness. Vanessa stiffened, listening. "Probably one of the gardener's cats," she said finally. "They always sneak in. Focus." Marcus returned to his task, but his movements grew faster, more anxious. The brake fluid began to drip slowly, like dark tears pooling beneath the car. Amara clenched her fists so tightly her nails cut into her palms. She wanted to scream, to run, to stop them, but her body wouldn't move. Fear, cold and ancient, pinned her like a nail through fabric. "Once he's gone," Vanessa murmured, standing to stretch her arms, "I'll be the grieving fiancé. I'll cry for the cameras. Talk about how he dreamed of building schools in Africa, how we had planned to adopt, how he left behind a legacy. Then I disappear to Bali for a spiritual recovery and collect the payout." "Cold," Marcus muttered. "Effective," Vanessa corrected. "I earned this. Do you know how many years I've waited for this level of security, of leverage?" Her voice dropped an octave. "These men, Daniel, Morrison, Chen, they all wanted the same thing, a beautiful lie. I just gave it to them." Amara didn't know who Morrison or Chen were, but she understood the meaning. Daniel wasn't the first. He wouldn't be the last, unless someone stopped it. Unless she did. As Vanessa and Marcus finished, cleaning every trace of their work and resealing the hood of the Tesla, the garage returned to its pristine order. From the outside, it looked untouched, but underneath, death waited, precise, mechanical, inevitable. "Beautiful work," Vanessa whispered, stroking the hood like a predator petting prey. "Tomorrow, he dies in the arms of what he loves most." When they left, Amara waited for an hour before moving. Her legs had gone numb, her body shook, but her mind was on fire. She crawled to the car on trembling knees, reaching beneath it with her thin arms until her fingers touched the cold floor. The fluid was still there, faint and oily, a chemical scent biting into her nose. Grandma May had once shown her a brake pad in their old Buick, explaining how it made cars stop before the red light turned green. "This," May had said, tapping the metal gently, "is the difference between life and an accident." The memory felt like a scream. Amara looked up at the sleek red machine that Daniel had called his legacy. And for the first time in her short life, she understood what it meant to carry someone else's fate in your hands. Tomorrow, he would walk into this garage, smiling, humming, maybe thinking about vows and cake and floral arrangements. He would put the key into the car that had once been his father's dream and drive into death, unless she stopped him. But how? She was 6. She was homeless. She was invisible. She didn't even exist in the system anymore. No one would listen. No one would believe. But as she crawled back into her corner, wiping the brake fluid from her hands onto her tattered shirt, she made a promise. Not to Grandma May, not to Daniel, but to herself. If she had to scream, she would. If she had to run into the middle of the road, throw rocks at windows, break the spell that Vanessa had cast on the world, she would do it. Because doing the right thing, May had always said, wasn't about being safe. It was about being brave. And sometimes, little bird, you have to be the storm before the sky even knows it's coming. The morning broke with the kind of deceptive beauty that only autumn in Atlanta could conjure. Golden light spilling through tall windows, dew clinging like fragile diamonds on manicured hedges, and birds chirping as if they hadn't a care in the world. Inside the Brooks estate, everything shimmered with the promise of a perfect day. The wedding rehearsal, the polished crystal glasses already set on the dining table, the soft music floating through the air like rose petals in slow motion. But down in the garage, tucked in the breathless silence behind a stack of smart battery crates, Amara Johnson hadn't slept. Her eyes were red, but not from tears. There were none left. Her hands were dirty, brake fluid dried on her fingers like invisible ink. Her heart beat not with fear, but with decision. Today was the day, and she was going to stop him. She waited until the sun had fully risen, until the rhythm of footsteps above told her that Daniel was finishing breakfast, his routine predictable. He always had one slice of toast with almond butter, followed by a short walk on the terrace, then into the garage. She knew his schedule better than he did, and she knew she had minutes, no more. Through the garage's side window, she saw them, Daniel and Vanessa, eating together on the sun-drenched patio. From a distance, they looked perfect. She in a white blouse and pearl earrings, he in rolled sleeves and soft laughter. But Amara's eyes weren't fooled. She watched how Vanessa's smile tightened every time he looked away, how her fingers tapped against the table, counting invisible seconds, how she leaned in just a little too closely when she whispered, "After your little joyride, we'll be inseparable." Daniel smiled and kissed her cheek, then checked his watch. "Just a quick spin," he said. "Make sure everything's ready." Then he stood. Vanessa stood too, smoothing her blouse like nothing was out of place. Amara's breath caught. It was happening. Now. She couldn't hide anymore. As Daniel turned toward the garage, keys jingling in hand, Amara burst from the bushes like a lightning strike. Her bare feet slapped against the slick flagstone, her tangled curls wild in the breeze, her small body nothing but urgency and desperation. Sir, don't get in your car," she screamed. Her voice, thin but piercing, cut through the quiet like a blade. "She broke it last night." Daniel stopped in his tracks, stunned. The keys froze mid-spin on his finger. His eyes, calm, calculating, curious, narrowed as the tiny girl came to a skidding halt before him. Breathless, barefoot, trembling, but fierce. Behind them, Vanessa's coffee cup slipped from her hand and shattered on the marble terrace. Dark liquid spread across the stone like a warning. "Don't drive the red car," Amara gasped. "They want to hurt you." "Darling," Vanessa's voice rose with practiced concern, already walking down the stairs toward them, eyes wide. "Who is this child?" She reached for Daniel's arm, her tone honeyed with alarm. "She must have wandered in from the street. We need to call security." But Daniel didn't move. His gaze was locked on Amara. There was something in her eyes that he couldn't ignore, something too real, too raw. "They cut the lines," Amara said, pointing toward the garage. "Under your pretty car, the man in black and the lady with the sharp fingernails. They said you'd crash at the scary curve." Vanessa's breath hitched, only for a second, but Daniel saw it, a flicker of panic before the mask returned. "Ryan, this is absurd." "What's your name, sweetheart?" Daniel interrupted gently. Amara blinked. Amara Johnson. "I've been living in your garage because it's warm and safe, but your car isn't, not anymore." Vanessa stepped forward. "This is insane. She's clearly been hallucinating. She's dirty, barefoot, probably malnourished." "I'm calling 911, Daniel said, pulling out his phone. Calm, cold, final. "I want police and a certified mechanic, now." Vanessa's face drained of color. "Ryan," she said, more breath than word. But Daniel wasn't listening anymore. He had spent years reading rooms, reading people, building a company on gut instinct, and everything in him screamed, "Listen to the girl." Amara stood her ground, panting, pointing at Vanessa. "She said 50 million when you die. I heard her. She said the car would crash and nobody would know it was her. But I know." Silence. Then, "You little brat," Vanessa hissed, just loud enough for Amara to hear. The tone chilled Amara's spine, but she didn't flinch. "They said Sunset Bluff," she added, voice trembling. "That place that kills people." Daniel's eyes snapped back to Vanessa. Sunset Bluff. He had never told anyone the exact spot, except, he realized, her. Vanessa. Slowly, deliberately, he turned his back to her and spoke into the phone. "Yes. 1247 Haven Ridge Lane. I need law enforcement and a master technician to inspect a potential vehicle sabotage." Behind him, Vanessa's perfect poise cracked. She muttered something under her breath, took one step back, then another. Amara saw it first. The cornered look in her eyes. The shift in posture. Fight or flight. Daniel was already blocking her path to the garage. Officers would be here in minutes. "You'll regret this," Vanessa whispered, eyes flicking from Daniel to Amara. "Both of you." But Amara didn't move, and Daniel didn't blink. Together, they stood in the rising light. One man, one girl, united by a truth stronger than fear. While they waited for the police, Daniel ushered Amara gently into the garage, his hand hovering protectively near her small shoulder, without quite touching. The instinct there, but the caution clear. He didn't want to frighten her more than she already was. His face had changed. The open warmth was still there, but now layered beneath a quiet steel, the kind of cold clarity that comes only when a man sees too much truth to keep pretending. Vanessa followed a few steps behind, her heels clicking faster than usual, her breath tight, though her voice remained syrupy. "Ryan, this is absurd. You're letting a homeless child, a trespasser, make wild accusations based on, what, fantasies?" But Daniel wasn't looking at her. He was crouching in front of the Tesla now, his fingers brushing the edge of the front wheel well, where Amara had said the fluid pooled. And sure enough, though someone had tried to clean it, there was a faint residue, oily, nearly invisible, but not to a man who knew every inch of this car like he knew his own heartbeat. "Maria," he called over his shoulder toward the hallway beyond the kitchen, "please bring a blanket and hot chocolate." Vanessa's mouth opened. "Ryan, are you serious?" "She's 6, he replied without looking at her, his voice flat. "And she just stopped me from dying." Within minutes, 2 squad cars pulled into the driveway, lights flashing, but no sirens. A black van arrived soon after, carrying Tom Reynolds, the veteran mechanic Daniel trusted with every restoration project. Behind them came Detective Cassandra Lee, a woman in her early 40s with eyes sharp enough to cut through smoke. She took one look at the scene, the barefoot child with trembling lips, the pale socialite frozen beside a vintage Tesla, and Daniel Brooks standing like a storm caught mid-breath, and knew this wasn't a false alarm. "Start with the vehicle," she ordered. "And I want everyone separated for questioning," Vanessa interjected. "Detective, surely you see this as just—" "Ma'am," Lee cut in smoothly. "The child will speak with me. Mr. Reynolds will inspect the car. You can sit right there." Vanessa's lips tightened, but she obeyed. Tom Reynolds slid under the Tesla with a small flashlight and a low groan. "If someone touched my work," he muttered, "I'll know it." 5 minutes passed, then 10. Amara sat wrapped in Maria's blanket, the warm mug trembling in her grip, but untouched. Daniel crouched beside her, one hand resting lightly on the floor, steady and near. He didn't press her for answers. He didn't ask how long she had been living under his roof unnoticed. He simply stayed, and that, more than anything, made her feel safe. At last, Tom rolled out from beneath the car, wiped his hands on an old cloth, and stood with a grim look on his face. "Someone cut the brake lines," he said simply. Not all the way, but enough that they'd fail under heavy braking. Exactly what had happened on a downhill curve like Sunset Bluff. Clean job? Professional. Silence fell like snow. Vanessa stood abruptly. "That's impossible. There must be some mistake. Or maybe the system was already flawed." Daniel turned to her slowly. "You told me last night that you trusted me with your life," he said. "Turns out I should have asked if I could trust you with mine." Vanessa's expression cracked like porcelain under pressure, but she recovered quickly. "You're going to believe this child? Over me?" "She knew about the curve," Daniel said quietly. "About the life insurance amount, about the tools, about Marcus." Vanessa's jaw twitched. I never said any of that to her." "Exactly," Daniel replied. Detective Lee stepped forward. "Mr. Brooks, if you'll excuse us, I'd like to review your security footage, specifically from this garage in the last 72 hours. Vanessa's eyes widened. "Wait, those cameras weren't—" She stopped. Everyone heard it. Lee's pen froze midair. "Weren't what, Ms. Monroe?" Vanessa paled. "Weren't facing this angle. I mean, I assumed—" "They were," Daniel corrected. "I installed 360 coverage 3 months ago after the press leaked my schedule, but only I have access to the cloud backups, which I never disabled." Vanessa's silence was louder than a scream. 30 minutes later, the footage played back on Detective Lee's tablet. Grainy but clear, the black and white feed showed a woman in dark athletic gear slipping into the garage at 2:17 a.m., followed by a man in a cap and gloves. The camera caught everything: the tools, the cutting, the whispers. Vanessa's voice, cool and precise, saying, "It'll look like old equipment. The media won't question it." And Marcus replying, "He's rich. No one suspects rich people die from murder. They die from bad luck." When the video ended, Vanessa didn't speak. She didn't argue. She didn't cry. She ran, bolted toward the front door in a blur of panic and desperation. But the officers were ready. They caught her before she reached the steps, her heels clattering across the marble like a woman already lost. "You don't understand," she screamed as they restrained her. "I deserved his world, his money, his life." Her hair came undone, lips smeared, eyes wild. She looked nothing like the composed socialite from 30 minutes before. She looked like truth exposed, broken, ugly, dangerous. Amara watched it all from the edge of the garage. She felt no triumph, only breath. For the first time in what felt like years, she exhaled. That evening, the mansion fell into a strange quiet. Not the stillness of peace, but the silence that comes after a storm, when the furniture is still standing, but nothing feels quite in place. The echo of Vanessa's final scream still lingered in the marble hallways, like perfume refusing to dissipate. Daniel sat in the study, his elbows resting on the mahogany desk that had once belonged to his father, the same man who taught him how to hold a wrench before he could spell the word. His phone buzzed with nonstop notifications, breaking news alerts, media inquiries, shareholder questions, but he ignored them all. In the far corner of the room, curled up on the leather armchair with a cup of warm cocoa and a knitted blanket around her shoulders, Amara watched him with quiet eyes. Not afraid, not tense, just waiting. She had been waiting her whole life for someone to turn and see her. Now he had. "You saved my life," Daniel said finally, his voice hoarse. Amara shook her head. "I just told the truth." "The truth most people would have been too scared to speak," he replied, turning toward her. "Especially at your age, especially when no one was looking." A pause hung between them. Then she whispered, "I thought, if I stayed quiet, I'd be safe. But safe isn't the same as right. Grandma May always said that. Daniel leaned back, letting those words settle into him. Safe isn't the same as right. You've been living here this whole time? She nodded. Since before Halloween. I found the vent behind the solar crates. It was warm, quiet. I didn't take much, just scraps. I didn't want to bother anybody. You didn't bother me, he said gently. You protected me. Amara looked down at her hands. I thought if I told someone, they'd take me away. They always take kids away. Daniel swallowed hard. No one's taking you anywhere, not unless you want them to. She looked up, startled by the certainty in his voice. But I don't belong here. You belong somewhere you're safe, somewhere you're seen, somewhere you're not just surviving, you're living. His voice trembled slightly. I never thought I'd meet someone who reminded me so much of my father and someone I'd never met before, all in one. And I don't know if I deserve to be part of your story, Amara, but I want to be. She blinked. You want me to stay? He nodded slowly. Only if you want to. For a moment she didn't speak. Then she whispered, What if the scary lady comes back? Then we'll face her together, Daniel said. But she's not coming back, and even if she did, she'd have to get through me first. That night, Daniel had a guest room prepared not with sterile white sheets and formality, but with bright blankets, stuffed animals Maria had dug out from the attic, and books chosen by the housekeeper herself. He left the door ajar, just in case. But Amara didn't sleep in the bed. Instead, at midnight, she walked softly down the hall, found his study still lit, and curled up on the couch beside his desk. I didn't want to be alone, she murmured. Neither did I, he said, gently covering her with a blanket. And there they stayed. One man whose world had nearly ended, and one little girl who'd given him a reason to start again. The following days passed in a haze of headlines and whispered phone calls, of legal meetings and quiet breakfasts eaten at the sunroom table where laughter had once felt rehearsed. But now, with Amara sitting across from Daniel, it felt like something new was being built in its place. The media had erupted the moment the news broke. Green Corps CEO nearly murdered in wedding sabotage plot. Billionaire saved by mysterious child witness. The Tesla trap, a love gone lethal. Daniel shut down all interviews. No cameras, no statements. Not while Amara was in the house. Not while the girl who had saved his life was still afraid to fall asleep without a light on. He had lawyers and publicists manage the noise. What mattered to him now was the silence between headlines. Quiet mornings with pancake syrup on Amara's chin. Afternoons when they walked through the greenhouse she called the jungle. And evenings when they read aloud from her favorite books, taking turns voicing the characters. But peace, as Daniel had long known, never lasted when you had enemies who'd failed. One morning, just as the October sky darkened again with another storm, Detective Cassandra Lee called. Daniel, she said flatly, Marcus Grant was released on bail. Daniel stood in his study, one hand gripping the windowsill so tightly the wood creaked. How? Procedural error, Lee said, disgust in her tone. One of the search warrants was dated incorrectly. His lawyer argued the evidence was contaminated. He's still being charged, but the judge allowed temporary release. He's wearing an ankle monitor. He's not allowed within a mile of your property. Doesn't matter, Daniel said, his voice like steel. If he wants revenge, that bracelet won't stop him. That night, Daniel doubled the security. He updated every sensor, reinforced every lock, installed new panic buttons in every room, including the one Amara now called hers. But something in his chest, something he hadn't felt since his father died, tightened like a warning bell he couldn't silence. And Amara? She sensed it too. That evening, while they played cards in the study and the rain slapped hard against the windows, she whispered, "What if he comes back?" Daniel looked at her across the table. "Then we stop him." "Like last time?" "No," he said, voice low. "This time, we finish it." At 2:07 a.m., as thunder rolled across the Georgia sky and the power blinked in a brief surge, the mansion's backup generators kicked in. For most houses, that would have been enough, but not for Daniel's. Not when 3 of the exterior cameras stayed offline, just long enough. The silent alarm pinged his phone. Motion detected. Lower south corridor. a part of the house rarely used, a part that backed up to the private beach path. Daniel woke instantly. He reached for the panic button, but froze when he heard it. Footsteps. Inside, somewhere downstairs, a door creaked open. And then, a voice. "I know you're here, you little brat." Amara bolted upright from her bed, her hands clenched in the sheets. Daniel reached her seconds later. "Come with me," he whispered, "just like we practiced." Together, they slipped through the hallway, Daniel's hand on her back, guiding her toward the study. But Amara stopped. "No," she said. "This way." She led him, fast and low, toward the second-floor library. Behind a tall bookshelf of forgotten first editions, she tugged at a panel Daniel had never even noticed. It slid open with a groan. "I found it weeks ago," she said. "It connects to the servant quarters." He didn't ask how she'd discovered it. He just followed. They crawled into the narrow passage, the air musty, the wood creaking beneath their knees. From the vents they heard Marcus's voice again, closer this time, filled with rage. "You cost me everything. You think you can just replace people like us with a kid?" Daniel pressed the emergency beacon. Police were on their way, but with the storm, they could be 15 minutes out. "He's got nothing to lose," Amara whispered. Daniel wrapped an arm around her. "He's wrong," he said. "He lost the moment you spoke the truth." In the darkness, they waited, hearing the thuds of drawers being pulled open, the crash of something glass hitting the floor, and Marcus muttering to himself, like a man unraveling. Then, headlights through the storm, sirens, a final scream, doors kicked open, a scuffle, footsteps, and silence. When Detective Lee found them 20 minutes later, emerging from the hidden corridor, her jacket soaked, her badge flashing under emergency lights, she looked at Amara with something like awe. "You led him here," she said softly. Amara nodded. "Because this time, I knew he'd come." The courtroom was colder than Amara expected, not in temperature, but in feeling. The walls of polished oak and towering windows gave it the air of a cathedral, but the silence within was heavier, holier in a way that made her small frame shrink in the witness chair. She wore a dark blue dress Maria had picked out, her curls gently pinned back. Her shoes, new but stiff, dangled above the polished floor as Judge Miriam Clay called the session to order. It had been 4 months since Marcus was dragged out of Daniel's foyer in handcuffs, his ankle monitor blinking red, his eyes burning with the fury of a man who had gambled everything and lost to a child. And now, finally, both he and Vanessa, her hair longer now, her makeup understated, and her eyes permanently ringed with the darkness of too many nights alone, were facing the full weight of justice. The courtroom buzzed with press passes, legal aids, and silent tension. Daniel sat in the front row, wearing a navy suit, his hands folded but knuckles white. Behind him were security guards in plain clothes. But in front of everyone, at the center of it all, was Amara. "Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?" the bailiff asked. Amara looked up, chin steady. "Yes, sir." The prosecuting attorney, a kind-eyed woman named Angela Chen, began with simple questions. "Can you tell us how you came to be in Mr. Brooks's garage?" "I didn't have anywhere else to go," Amara said softly. "My grandma, she passed, and I didn't want to go into foster care." "So you hid?" "Yes, I found a warm place behind the crates. I didn't touch anything. I just listened." "And what did you hear, Amara?" The courtroom stilled. Vanessa leaned forward, her hands clasped tightly. Marcus looked down. Amara's voice didn't shake. "I heard that lady, talking on the phone. She said after the ceremony, the car would crash, that $50 million would come from it. She said it like it was nothing, like he didn't matter." Gasps rippled. Vanessa's attorney shot to his feet. "Objection, hearsay." The judge didn't blink. "Overruled. The child's statement is consistent with previous deposition and surveillance footage." Amara's fingers gripped the armrest. "They didn't know I was there, but I saw them. I saw them with tools. They cut something under the red car. I didn't know what it was until the man, Marcus, said the brakes wouldn't work after the second turn. He called it poetic." Vanessa flinched. Her nails dug into the wood of the defense table. When it was the defense's turn, her lawyer approached slowly, as though trying not to spook a wild animal. "Amara," he said with exaggerated kindness, "isn't it true that you were scared, that perhaps you misunderstood what you heard?" Amara looked straight into his eyes. "I know what I heard. I didn't want anyone to know I was there, but I couldn't let him die." Her voice cracked just slightly. "I couldn't let her win." "Her?" he asked. "Do you mean Vanessa Monroe?" "I mean the woman who smiled like a friend and talked like a killer." Murmurs filled the courtroom. Even the stenographer paused. Daniel blinked hard, the pride in his chest swelling to something he could barely contain. Then Vanessa did the unthinkable. She stood. "Let her speak," she snapped. "I want to hear what she has to say." Her lawyer tugged at her sleeve, but she shook him off. "I'm tired of pretending." The judge narrowed her eyes. "Ms. Monroe, you will sit down or be removed." But Vanessa didn't sit. She stepped forward, as far as the bailiff allowed, and looked straight at Amara. "You ruined everything," she hissed. "You don't know what it's like to have nothing, to build yourself out of dust and sweat, only to be replaced by a girl who didn't even belong in that house." "You're wrong," Amara replied. "I know exactly what it's like to have nothing. That's why I knew how much he deserved someone who wouldn't lie to his face." Vanessa's breath caught, her expression crumbling. She said nothing more. She just turned, slow and defeated, and allowed herself to be seated. The next day, after less than 5 hours of deliberation, the jury returned unanimous guilty verdicts on all counts: attempted murder, conspiracy to commit fraud, tampering with evidence, and endangerment of a minor. The judge's sentence was swift: 25 years for Vanessa, with no parole for the first 15. 8 years for Marcus, reduced for cooperation, but to be served in a federal facility. As they were led away, Vanessa turned one last time toward Amara, but the look in her eyes wasn't hatred anymore. It was hollow, as if she had finally seen what the girl really was. Not a threat, not a symbol, but a mirror. A child who had survived more darkness than most adults ever faced, and still chose light. The days after the trial unfolded like pages from a storybook, written in soft pencil, quiet, gentle, almost unsure of its own softness. The mansion, once echoing with emptiness, began to hum with something new. Not just with footsteps or laughter, but with a presence, with belonging. Amara's drawings began to appear on the refrigerator door, stick figures with smiling faces labeled "Me" and "Mr. Daniel." Trees with pink clouds for leaves, and one picture of the red Tesla with a Band-Aid on its side and the words "Not Dead" in crooked lettering. Daniel framed that one. It sat on his desk beside a photograph of his father. One morning, over pancakes drenched in too much syrup, Daniel set his fork down and looked at her across the table. "You ever thought about what it would be like to stay here forever?" Amara blinked. "Like, forever? Forever?" "Yeah," he said. "I mean, the kind of forever that comes with last names and birthdays and dance recitals if you ever wanted to try dancing, or science camp, or maybe just weekends where you don't have to worry about where you'll sleep." She stared at her plate for a long time. "I don't think people keep me that long." "They didn't," he said softly. "But I will." For the first time since the night she'd burst from the bushes screaming about brake lines, Amara didn't reply with a wall of silence or a change of subject. Instead, she whispered, "What if I mess up?" Daniel reached across the table, wiping syrup from her chin with the corner of a napkin. "Then we clean it up together. That's what families do." That afternoon, he made the first call to his attorney. Then another, to Helen Martinez, the social worker who had been overseeing Amara's temporary status. Helen was cautious. "There's a cousin in Tampa," she reminded him. "Marcus Parker, expressed interest in Amara's custody months ago." "Marcus Parker," Daniel repeated flatly, "who only came forward after news broke that she'd saved a billionaire's life. He's never even met her, and frankly, I don't trust people who suddenly want children once the cameras show up." "Neither do I," Helen admitted. "But the process takes time: background checks, home inspections, psychological evaluations." "Then start today," he said. "We've already lost enough time." Over the next 2 months, Daniel filled out more paperwork than he had during the founding of Green Corps. He answered dozens of questions about parenting philosophies, conflict resolution, trauma response, bedtime rituals. He even attended 3 weekend workshops about caring for children with abandonment histories. Amara was quieter during those weeks, cautious again, as if waiting for the other shoe to drop. But Daniel never flinched. When she had night terrors, he was there. When she spilled juice on his laptop, he didn't yell. He just laughed and said, "Well, I guess we're doing paper reports this week." And when the power flickered one stormy night and she burst into tears, he didn't offer logic. He just sat beside her, held her close, and whispered, "It's just light, and I'll be yours even when it's dark." Eventually, the visits from Helen changed. They became less formal, warmer. She began to smile when she entered the home, began to sit longer, began to bring coloring books instead of clipboards. "It's rare," she said one afternoon, sipping tea in the sunroom, "to see this much trust grow this fast. But I think the two of you—" She paused, choosing her words. "You didn't just survive something together. You became something because of it." On a rainy Friday morning, Judge Patricia Williams signed the final papers. Amara Johnson officially became Amara Johnson Brooks. That evening, Daniel and Amara stood under the gazebo in the garden, the very spot where she had once hidden in fear, watching him through the window. Now, fairy lights sparkled above them, and a chocolate cake sat between them with the words, "Welcome home, Amara." "Does this mean I'm yours now?" she asked. Daniel knelt, smiling. "You've always been mine. Now the world just knows it." She touched the cake knife. "Do I get to cut it?" "Only if I get the first slice." She grinned. "Deal." And as they laughed and made the messiest first cut in cake history, Daniel realized something deep in his chest had changed. Not just because he had adopted a child, but because he had found family, not by blood, not by plan, but by choice. And somehow, that made it even more real. 1 year to the day since Amara had run barefoot across the dew-covered lawn, screaming about brake lines and betrayal, the Brooks estate looked very different. The hedges still curved in perfect symmetry. The garage still gleamed like the vault of a private museum. But everything inside, every hallway, every room, had changed. It was in the fingerprints on the windows from messy art projects, in the folded blanket on the couch where father and daughter had fallen asleep mid-movie, in the small scuff on the banister that Daniel refused to repaint because, as he said, that's where Amara laughed so hard she fell on the stairs. And beyond the kitchen, out in the corner of the garden, where a shadowed girl once hid in fear, there now stood a treehouse. Not the kind cobbled together with boards and bent nails. This one had glass panels for stargazing, a reading nook built into its walls, and a soft hammock that stretched between two beams. It had taken 3 months to build and had been designed by one of Green Corps' senior architects as a gift. "For the girl who saved the man who saves the planet," the architect had said with a grin. On the anniversary morning, Daniel found Amara already there, legs tucked under her, hair a little longer, body taller. But her eyes, still as wide and quietly wise as ever, lit up when she saw him. "You remembered," she said, pointing at the pancakes he carried in a box, shaped like stars, just like she liked them. "Of course I remembered," Daniel replied. "This is our day." They ate in the treehouse, syrup sticky on their fingers, watching the wind stir the garden below. Then Amara grew quiet. "Do you think she's sorry?" she asked. "Vanessa?" Daniel blinked. "Maybe, but maybe not. Sometimes people hurt others because they've been hurt, but they never learn how to stop the cycle." "Grandma May used to say that too," Amara whispered. "She said pain grows things, but only if you give it light." Daniel nodded, watching her. "You gave me light, Amara." She tilted her head. "I thought I gave you a headache." He laughed, ruffling her curls. "Both can be true." From the window of the treehouse, they could see the curve of the driveway where Daniel had almost climbed into the Tesla that morning, oblivious to the death waiting beneath it. Amara leaned forward. "I think about it sometimes," she said. "What would have happened if I stayed quiet?" "Then I wouldn't be here," Daniel replied softly. "Or if I were, I'd be someone else, someone lonelier." She reached into the small drawer beside the hammock and pulled out a necklace, a single key hanging from a silver chain. "This is still mine, right?" "It always will be," Daniel said. "You have full access." "Even to the cookie cabinet?" He narrowed his eyes playfully. "Even that." A bird landed on the treehouse railing then, fluffed its feathers, and chirped at them, like it too had come to mark the day. Amara watched it for a long time. Do you think I was meant to find your house? Daniel didn't answer right away. He looked out at the garden, at the place where fate had drawn two broken hearts together. I don't know if the universe plans things, Amara, but I know this. I was meant to be yours. And in the quiet that followed, under a sky the color of memory, they leaned into each other, not because of what they'd survived, but because of what they'd built from it. That night, after dinner and card games and an impromptu dance party in the kitchen that left Maria wiping pancake batter off the ceiling, Amara stood in her bedroom doorway, holding the edges of her blanket like it was armor. Daniel passed by, coffee in hand, pausing when he saw her. Can't sleep? She hesitated, then shook her head. It's not the scary kind of not sleep, she clarified. Just the thinking kind? He nodded. Want to talk? She bit her lip. Can we go to the treehouse? So they did. He carried a lantern, she carried a notebook. The wind was soft that evening, brushing through the trees like a lullaby. In the distance, the city lights of Atlanta blinked like faraway stories being written in other windows. I was thinking, Amara said, sitting down on the floor, about how some things disappear but still leave behind something real, like Grandma May, or being scared. You're not scared anymore? Daniel asked gently. She shrugged. Sometimes, but now I know it doesn't mean I'm alone. He leaned back, letting her words settle the way they always did, with more wisdom than her years should have allowed. Do you ever miss your old life? He asked. She thought about it, her face serious. I miss parts of it, not the cold or the running, but I miss knowing that I could disappear and no one would care. It made everything feel simple. Daniel exhaled slowly. Sometimes I miss the quiet of not knowing what I needed, because once you know, you can't unknow. You have to fight to keep it. She looked over. Are we something you have to fight for? No, he said. You're something I choose, every day. That's different. Amara opened her notebook and flipped to the last page. Inside was a drawing, two figures under a big treehouse, one tall, one small. Their hands were reaching up toward a sky filled with stars that looked like keys. I want to write our story one day, she said. Not just the scary parts, but the parts where we healed. Then you should, Daniel said. You already are. Will anyone read it? The right people always do. Down below, in the soft light of the garden, the garage stood silent, a witness to what had once been a hiding place and had become something sacred instead. It held no more danger now, no more secrets. Just memory. A testament to how a little girl's voice had changed the course of a life, of two lives. As the lantern flickered and the breeze kissed their faces, Amara whispered, Do you think other people like us, people who are broken, can find each other too? Daniel looked at her and smiled. I don't think broken people find each other. I think brave people do. And brave people change everything. In the stillness, their shadows stretched across the treehouse floor, side by side, no longer running, no longer hiding. A child who had spoken truth into a world of doubt. And a man who had nearly died with everything, only to live with something far greater. Family, not by blood, but by choice. And that kind of love never fades. It just grows, like roots, quiet, deep, and strong beneath everything. And that, after all, was the story Amara would one day write. Not the story of survival, but the story of choosing to live out loud. She was just a little girl, with no home, no voice, and no reason to believe anyone would listen. But when it mattered most, she spoke, and changed a life. And in return, she was no longer just a survivor. She became someone's daughter. Their story was not about fate. It was about choice, to trust, to protect, to love, even when it was terrifying. If this story touched your heart, share it. Because somewhere out there, another Amara is waiting to be seen. Let us know in the comments. What would you have done if you were her? Don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss a story that matters. This is Flow Story, where every voice has power and every truth has a home.